My name is Stephen Shaw and I am a design partner at Big Motive. Big Motive is a design and innovation company and we make digital products and services. So product design for me is digital product design because when I studied at the art college we talked about product design and it meant physical products, it meant ergonomics and aesthetics and those kinds of things. These days when we talk about it in our world, it's digital products like apps and websites and how they work and what they look like. The newest thing that I've learned that's improved my design work, I would say that's how important it is to leave things out, especially when we're testing new products and ideas, not always to put everything in. Because oftentimes it's the absence of something that prompts the response for the need for it, rather than lots and lots of things that people have to look at and evaluate. So the design process always needs to be framed by a challenge or a problem that you're trying to solve. You could describe that in a brief and you could get into lots of detail, or you can just simply try to really drill down to what's the one thing that we need to address in this process. We talk a lot about the difference between the user experience and the product design and even the service that sits within. So quite often we'll go right back to, if this is a digital product that's partially delivering a service, or that's part of a bigger experience and not standalone, we need to go right back to the beginning of that and find out what people are trying to do and what they want to achieve from that, not just the product itself. The most important aspect of my job is to be the difficult, awkward voice of the complaining user. The person that ultimately will be sitting and engaging with whatever it is that we design, and trying to give their voice as much space and as much time to be heard in our design process as possible. Designers, myself included, will always err towards the thing that we think is the greatest solution and the new idea and the fresh way of approaching things, and we hate to think that we're doing anything that's not new, and that often leads you down a road in which you've created a product that people don't understand or is too difficult to use. So yes, the most important thing that I can do is be connected to the reality of the end user and what they're trying to achieve with the product. So it's always a chicken and egg thing. What we would always say about any product design exercise is that we would stick with the bias for action. So what's the smallest amount we need to do to learn the most? Sometimes that means that you need a really beautifully expansive and detailed design system or guidelines or UI manual or whatever you want to call it, so that an existing product can sort of take the next step up. But if it's a product that it's in its earliest stages or that is just coming out of the traps, it might be that a rough and ready prototype, a way of getting people to engage with the concept, is more useful. So it's kind of dependent on the context whether first you would go for a beautiful design system or something more kind of rough and ready. There's a lot of really good work being done in digital product design at the moment, and a lot of kind of standards have started to be set, not necessarily accessibility or official, WCAG standards, but designers have started to get really good at knowing how to build interfaces and build products that are using existing behaviors that people are familiar with. And I think what Uber have done over the course of the last few years in their consumer app has built on a lot of that while still feeling quite distinct and unique and different from many other experiences. And they have conveyed a long established user experience or customer experience taxis in a completely new way that has transformed the way that sector works. I think that's a good example of something that's leading from a product design perspective. That's a really good question. The trends that we look for in design as a discipline or as an area of interest, within Big Motive we each pardon me, within Big Motive we each have our own kind of area of specialism or interest. Some of us are really on the tools and literally sort of building products. Others are more involved in research, and others again are in the strategy side. So each of us will have different places that we go to. One of the sort of standout things that I would recommend anyone with a passing interest in design or product design catch up on is John Maida's annual report on the state of design that he launches every year at South by Southwest. That is the starting point every year for inspiration and for other reading, and yeah, that's really worth checking out. So the key questions that we would ask when designing a product are kind of common sense questions, to be honest with you. They're questions like, why would anyone care? What problem is this solving? There's some really interesting ideas in Clay Christensen's jobs to be done theory, the idea that we hire products and services rather than buy them. The relationship consumers have with these things is more transient, and we're looking for solutions and ongoing solutions. So we try to think from that perspective of, what is the job that our customer or our user has that needs to be solved or needs to be dealt with. So we would ask a lot about that, and we would also ask, and this is even more fundamental, who is the customer and who are our users. Sometimes people get straight into things without really shaping or being clear on what that is. And I think that's, who is it for? And what problem of theirs is it actually going to solve? And I suppose in supplement to that, why would they care? Is it a problem worth solving? And how do we convince them? How do we onboard them? How do we get them excited about it in a way that's instantly meaningful? So the design process for us is, in its simplest form, the classic design thinking process, the Stanford D-School model, the 5 hexagons. Sorry, it's a bit kind of geeky. It's starting with definition. It's talking about all those issues around who is it for and why. Then it's into ideation. It's into thinking about potential solutions. Thinking about the assumptions that we already have and how we test those. Then it's into building something, to making as early as possible some kind of prototype that we can test, testing that, and then learning from it, and then following that cycle as a loop. There was in the past and in many jobs that I worked in previously, the sense that design was a process that started with a brief and ended with a solution, and then it was done. And I suppose one of the differences that we would see now, especially in digital product design, is that it's an ongoing process in which you try to have something that you can test as early as possible, and you don't hang around waiting for perfection, because you learn a lot more from things that aren't right than you do from things that are 100% perfect. So we would define who we're designing the product for using some simple methods and processes, but ultimately it's about casting the net really broadly, thinking about the widest range of people we think this is going to be useful to or for, and those we think might be vaguely interested versus those we think might be super interested. Then we'll try to draw personas of those that are at the heart of our sort of product experience, A persona is really like a little character. It's like a written and sketched character of a kind of a person. We try to make them as real as possible because it's something that you can put up in the studio. You can go back to. You can talk about the person as they're a real person, and it helps to have discussions framed by something relatable rather than by like a demographic or something like that. Although that's only really one element of it. The personas themselves are living documents. Any research we do, any testing we do, always has a feedback loop into those, and we'll adapt them and broaden them. And then the other thing that we would tend to try and look for in the definition of our users is an extreme user, or someone whose experience of it is going to be critical. Somebody who might even potentially use the product for something else, kind of hack it or in some way repurpose it for a different thing. Because often there are insights from thinking about and talking to those people that are just as interesting as from the ones that, you know, are the very conventional, sort of this is who we think it's for and it's all about them. Success metrics are really important in design, and it's something that I think designers don't actually spend enough time trying to agree at the start. Certainly advertising and design in the sort of classical sense tended to try to avoid, you know, hard metrics on success, and various design awards over the years have tried to sort of measure that as opposed to creativity or something, you know, more difficult to pin down. For us, at the very beginning of the project, we look at things like where do we need to be in 2 years? You know, what success will the product have delivered in 2 years' time? And what are the things that are going to stand in the way of that? And going through that process tends to help us arrive at some kind of metric that is both going to be a challenge and something that's worth aiming for, but also something that we can stand over and say, you know, that was a way of measuring all of the decisions that we make. There's a really handy little tool. It's a strategizer tool called the test card, which we would often use. It's a one-page description of, we're going to test this, and these are the metrics that we're going to need to have in place to understand whether that test has been successful. So at a macro level, there is the 2-year goal, and at the micro level, every test that we run will have some kind of metric set against that. I think one of the invisible things that sometimes is so important in product design but is so often overlooked or misunderstood or not considered is the language. It's the copy, it's the micro copy that's used throughout the product. When it's done well and when it's right, it's totally invisible. You don't even notice that it's there. You just somehow feel that the product is your friend, or that it's helping you, or that it's working for you. When it's done badly, it can instantly alienate you. The most beautiful piece of interface design, the most elegant flow, the simplest of information can be ruined if the description or the microcopy being used is clumsy or technical, or, you know, appropriate in some places and then completely off-toned in other places. I think, yes, that's an invisible but hugely important part of it.